So, hello and welcome. We'd like to give you our greetings. I have a big sigh because the subject matter today just has me sighing.
Mm.
Um, but I am Samsarah Morgan, Executive Director of the Open Better Birth Foundation. I am also NIA Healing Center for Birth and Family Life. And I'm a counselor, coach, hypnotherapist, and doula in Oakland, California. And my co-host is
Reverend Stacey Reid from Oakland, California, currently in Maryland right now, working remotely. Life coach. My business is above all life coaching. So glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome. And we are two Black women talking.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, and we're going to be discussing a recent comment that came out from our sister Candace Owens. I want to call her sister because she needs a sisterhood.
Mm-hmm.
And she's, startlingly enough, I didn't know anything about her until this recent statement. I didn't even know, she wasn't even on my radar.
Right.
And she came out with this video talking about why she does not support George Floyd or why I do not support George Floyd, and here's why.
Mm-hmm.
And this video has definitely gone viral, super viral,
Mm-hmm.
and I believe over 6 million views.
Mm-hmm.
And it's created quite a bit of controversy. So I wanted us to check in, talk about it, talk about the ramifications of it, if any, and how we personally feel regarding another Black woman speaking this way.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any initial thoughts? Would you like to share?
Well, my initial thought is this: her perspective to me is heartbreaking for several reasons, but the first thing that comes to mind is this is a perfect example of what I've heard a lot of Black men say in regards to their relationships with their mothers, wives, girlfriends, is that you want to know why we go to white girls or outside of our race? This is a primary factor as to why, and I've heard this over the years, as to why our Black men end up other places. Because the verbal attacks that Miss Candace has done on this deceased man, regardless of his A to Z rap sheet, I mean, she goes full blown into the drugs in his system, to his criminal past, to his criminal history, which has absolutely nothing to do with the reason why he was killed and murdered. Has nothing to do with any of that. I could care less. And I don't believe that the Black community is lifting him up as this wonderful person. But personally, I don't know him to make such a claim.
Exactly.
Is that how his family feels about him? From what I've heard from his brother, he was changing his life around. That's, So regardless of the perspective of who he was as a person, the fact of the matter is, it sorrows me that we have the tendency, or some of us have the tendency of not looking at the current situation, at the current assault or attack of a human being, right? Regardless of what we've done in the past, when someone has made such an offense as assault and murder, I have a problem with that. Like, I mean, I believe that the community is outraged because a life was taken based on the color of his skin, or whatever threat this person who actually, the cop actually knew him and they have a past relationship.
Exactly.
Okay. So there are lots of factors. Bottom line is, yet another Black man is dead. and has been murdered. That's Miss Candace. That is why we are outraged,
Right.
because enough is enough. And how many times do we have to? George Floyd represents the billions of Black men, African American men, women, and children,
Right.
who have been victims, slaughtered, hung, raped, okay, enslaved by white America. Period.
Yeah.
Period. The end. And so, again, I feel like how many times do I have to apologize to whatever Black man I have any type of relationship with, because of the trauma that they have endured by mothers, Black women such as Candace, who berate them verbally, that always consistently brings up their past mistakes or their track record, getting off focus of, the human being that they are, who they were created to be. And so I'm heartbroken to hear a Black woman slander any Black man in this particular situation, which caused his death. And I'm gonna just stop there.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. I completely feel you, and it's a hard thing. On one hand, of course, we want to hold each other appropriately accountable. So,
Right.
to just to different to I don't want to play devil's advocate. So I don't like that expression.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to advocate for the devil, but I do want to look at the fact that we don't want to, as African American women, give a pass to inappropriate behavior on the part of our children, male or female.
Absolutely. Right.
I do believe we do need to have, as African American women, an understanding of the pressures on our children, male and female, to be good people. It is a miracle that overall we're as amazing as people as we are.
That's right. That's right.
And then those pressures are double on our boys. Because as soon as they walk out the door, people are seeing them as criminals. They're criminalized. Just their existence.
Right.
It calls to mind a time when I was, my guys, I have 5 sons, 4 of them are African American, and I was walking down Lakeshore Avenue one day, back when you could do that and would,
right,
look in the stops and see all the people and whatnot,
right,
here in Oakland, and three of my sons popped up on me on the street, and they're like, "Hi, Mom," blah, blah. And they're all smiling, they're all cute, and they're like 15, 16 years old at the time, so they're adorable. To me, these are my babies, and they're adorable, and they're just like trying to butter me up to get me to buy them some frozen yogurt.
Right.
So I'm smiling. It's a beautiful sunny day. My guys are cute. It's like, okay, you don't have to butter me up no more. They're like, "Please, mother," being charming. And we're going to walk down to the donut shop. We're over at Lakeshore and Mandanis. We have to walk down until like closer to Lakeshore in Rand.
Right.
Right. And we're walking down the street and we're passing all the outdoor cafes. We're passing by Arizmendi and, outside eateries for folks who are not of the area. Right. And we're walking through like a sea of white people at the time. And me watching my sons were ahead of me, walking ahead of me. And I was catching the looks that my children were getting from these white people as they were doing nothing. They were just walking down the street, poking each other and laughing and being 15, 16-year-old teenage boys, Black boys. They were laughing. They weren't even being all sullen and the gangster. They were laughing, and they were being acted like, "Oh, there's a bunch of roaches crawling down." That was the look that these people had on their face. And that filled me with so much rage. that how dare you? You don't know these children.
Right.
And how dare you regard my babies that way?
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of those moments that, oh, these children walk through this all the time.
Right.
They walk through this all the time.
Mm-hmm.
People give them the side eye all the time.
Mm-hmm.
People accuse them all the time.
Mm-hmm. And our babies are being handcuffed now as well. Their videos.
The 5-year-old, 6-year-old Black girl somewhere in this great land. What could she have done? I don't even know what it was about. I mean, this the whole criminalization of children, and particularly of Black children.
Right.
So for some people can tough through it. Some people can barrel through it. And then some people, they're like, well, if you think that way of me, I'm going to be that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right.
But some people's life circumstances, we don't know. We do not know.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just, there is that element. I mean, Ms. Owens is not alone.
Right.
There is that element in our own community where we will judge each other.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think we need to take a really hard look at that and be as fiercely fighting racism as anyone else. We have no choice in the matter. I think folks get to a certain place in life and they feel like, well, they have struggled and the struggle's over. Like I've been fortunate for the good chunk of my life to be lower middle class. So there's a lot of privilege in that.
Right.
And it's real easy to turn a blind eye to the conditions that my brothers and sisters are living in because I'm not sharing that direct experience.
Right. And it's in a lot of the topics and conversation I've seen in social media, which I'm happy to see people are talking about, that within the criminal system, yes, we need better trained officers, right? We need less jails and more schools. But the fact that people are now talking about the social and the economic injustices, right? And how the playing field has never been equal.
Never.
It has never been, fair. And we've been asking for these civil rights since forever, right? I mean, you see posts from 1965. I remember hearing stories from my own father in the civil rights movement, in SNCC, at the lunch counter. I mean, I grew up and majored in African American studies at Berkeley because my father is telling me these stories. So, although we have the Candace's perspective, right? I'm appreciative of other voices now, especially in the political field. Stacey Adams is one. Oprah has done a great series on Where Do We Go From Here. If you haven't seen it, I suggest highly that you see that. Where now, we're Zooming with all types of educated, gifted African-American people who maybe you once haven't heard of. From the spiritual aspect, I mean, she had a bishop on there, Stacey Adams, political, Avery from, Oprah, Queen Sugar, persons in the arts, right? So all of these different professional, educated, wise African-American, male and female, are now coming to the table, to the Zoom table remotely, right? Where we have the time and the attention for us to educate ourselves, number one, hear different perspectives, do videos like you and I are doing. And just the conversation has happened. And I know that we need to do a lot more than conversate, but at least the issues of social and economic injustices, even the spiritual, disconnections or learned behavior from Christianity in itself, when you think of our African roots and how now we become Christians and how the church has played a role into that. So I'm happy. I never thought in a million years that my degree from Berkeley, why are you majoring in African American studies? That, hey, now people are actually honoring, the history, our history. And then again, speaking and talking about criminals just aren't, born.
Sure.
A lot of it has to do with, not having school opportunities, not having education, living environments, home environments. And so when the opportunity and the education is not there, it's going to, after so long, the human patience level is going to expire. And it's, how do I feed my family? Not to justify criminal, being a criminal or robbing or stealing. However, that's easier said than done. And I'm a survivor of homelessness and domestic violence myself. So there were times that I personally did things outside of my ethical code at the time to survive. When hotel rooms are $130 a night. Okay. And that's not to mention the car note that you're living in your car like I was. The car note, the gas, the food that expires from winter to summer. I never in a million years thought Reverend Stacey would be in the position, that she once found herself, to do some of the things, to participate in some of the things that I participated in to survive, to get from Monday to Tuesday.
That's the big piece with our sister Candace.
Mm-hmm.
The lack of empathy,
right,
is atrocious.
Right.
She clearly, it seems like I'm making a judgment based around, the environment around her. She's having her little middle class experience,
mm-hmm.
right? And she has all of her needs met. And from that place of privilege, you cannot see what it would be to be a Black man in a more inner city environment without those resources and without those breaks.
Right.
Right. Mm-hmm. And so to be in this lofty place, and she's got her chest all puffed out. She's way too young for all that. She hasn't, in my what I've witnessed, she's in her 20s, right?
Right. And she also had, from my research, she also had, I believe, and I could be corrected, that there was a point in a high school or some school she was involved in.
White guys were molesting her, verbally abusing her, and she sued them.
Okay. So, that's an example.
That's a very privileged response right there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
She had the ability.
Right.
Little girl going to Ojai might not have that same, the wherewithal to find an attorney. That's a very middle class attitude. bless her.
Absolutely.
I'm glad she got recourse. I'm glad she addressed that. I'm not saying that she shouldn't, but she's not, she's not having that same experience that maybe somebody at the socioeconomic level of George Floyd or your basic little girl struggling to get through the hallways of Ojai could do.
Listen, you're also my godmother. So for had it not been for people like you in my life at 15 to 17 years old, that's a critical time. And the walls of Ojai were brutal, absolutely brutal to me personally. And so just to survive that and get in the door at Berkeley, the last year of affirmative action, by the way, even with a high GPA in extra curriculum, I didn't have test scores, and that's another thing. Those stat tests that Oakland High didn't prepare us to test like that to get into college. So had it not been, my scores were extremely low. Brilliant child, but extremely low test scores because I didn't go to prep, schools or have years of training. So that's another deciding factor.
And you have to be taught how to take those tests. They're just so you can sit down and take.
Right. And then the standardized test alone will, again, when we talk about white privilege, we're also talking about economic and social privilege connected to, you know, white America, you know, where they have the resources to have a college fund and have, you know, apartment money for their student or a car for their student in college. I had none of that. I worked for you at 16 years old in the daycare. I waitress tables. You know, I had a million different jobs just to pay for my school at Berkeley. So Candace, bless her heart. I mean, she's a very intelligent woman. She has a lot of brain behind her, but I do agree that the heart factor, the empathy, you know, for her own people, she really needs to be awakened.
And for herself as a human being, because I hope she never comes to a fall. You know, pride cometh before a fall, right? Pride goes before a fall. Right. And right now, you know, I'm assuming, I don't know her, but it's feeling like she hasn't had that situation. Having to sue must have been horrible. But I don't know since then.
I don't know
how it's been and what it's been.
Right.
And so, you know, when you have fallen more than once and gotten up and dusted yourself off, but for the grace of God, I did not find myself in any area of deep criminality.
Right.
You know, we can talk about me being a single mother, raising small children. For most of my parenting, I was a single mother.
Right.
That wasn't fun. The children were fun. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
Fight about them. But this world that we live in is not set up to support a young poor mama and her children, right? And so to just see her sitting there all haughty and puffed up and so cruel in her words and so dead in her heart towards this man, when out of her own mouth she said that yes, she read his rap sheet, like, you know, bring up all this stuff about him, but it had been 5 years since he had had any issues with the law till that moment that led to his death. Right. 5 years.
And again, whether he had drugs in the system or on him is beside the point. Actually, it needs to be, again, more training, police training on how to handle the drug afflicted if you're dealing with someone intoxicated or high, or someone like my own brother who has a handicap, you know, with schizophrenia, dual diagnosed, you know, where how do we deal or police persons like that without killing them?
Right.
It's unacceptable.
You can't bring a person down to the ground. You can't, you know, and it's your neck. And as I recall the video, they had him handcuffed. They had him sitting to the side and they brought him back.
He was handcuffed before he fell to the ground. And under no circumstances do you put your knee on someone's neck for 8.5 minutes. And they're screaming out.
One of the most powerful moments of his. I don't know if you got to see one of his memorials, the one where Reverend Al Sharpton spoke, and he had everybody do a moment of silence. They did 8 minutes and 27 seconds, I do believe. Forgive me if I'm getting that number wrong. You should never remember that number because it's horrendous. But they had a silence for that period of time. And halfway through, people started bursting more into tears. Because when you do that, that was very powerful to do. Because you feel how long that is. That's a long time.
And I don't know, I think like if I was there, and I know anybody would be risking their life, but no one did or felt like they could do anything to stop him. So all these people around him are witnessing a murder.
Right. And
that's for over 8 minutes.
And there was, I believe, a teenager that took that video. Wow. My understanding was a teenage girl took that video. So there's another traumatized human being that she stood there shaking, filming that. I do hope and pray that her community is taking care of her.
Right.
Because there's so many people that get lost in the shuffle when these things happen.
Right.
That young one who took that video needs so much love and help and therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And she needs to be able to talk about what she feels and how she felt. She's a hero. We're not hearing anything about this person. Maybe because she's a youth.
Mm-hmm.
I try to think, okay, maybe because she's a youth and they don't want to have crazy white supremacists harassing her or whatever. So I can see that. But as soon as she's 18,
so speaking of therapy, how does Mina Healing Center, your business, in regards to this topic matter or anything related, being in Oakland, because the protests are, happily happening continuously, especially in Oakland. So shout out to my hometown.
I had one right in front of me the other day. Well, we don't provide psychotherapy at Nia Healing Center. Right. We do counseling and coaching and hypnotherapy. So if someone has suffered a deep trauma, I would recommend for them to see a psychotherapist, and I would recommend refer them to folks that I know and trust. I'm very blessed to know some wonderful counselors of color that I could refer people to. And then they can work with me around there are ways that hypnotherapy can help you relive and release trauma. So it doesn't go and live in the cells of your body. That's the problem with trauma. That the feeling that you felt in a moment 20 years ago can still be completely alive in your cells today. Right. Because it wasn't worked through. Right. Generally, because when something bad happens, we try to shut each other down. Right. We try to say it wasn't that bad. Or we medicate somebody. We give them a drink. We give them a joint. We do all those things to seal in the trauma into their bodies. Right? People need to talk about it. They need to cry. They need to shake. They need to scream. They need to yell. They need to pace around. Like indigenous cultures, people would dance. Something would happen. People would dance for hours. Right. Right. You know? Right. So, excuse me. So, in this culture, we don't have any room for all that. You're supposed to suck it up. And you're supposed to act as normal as possible. Even if the most horrible thing in the world happened to you, you're supposed to, if you're lucky, you get like a month. Right. Before you have to pull it together and look normal again. So that everybody around you doesn't have to feel bad. Right. 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 So, no, I mean, I think what I would, what would have been helpful for my practice would be to work with Mr. Floyd around the struggles that he was having, settling into life after having been incarcerated. Right. You know, helping him double check on his recovery. Right. Having a coach to check in with. Are you going to your meetings? Are you doing your steps? Do you have a sponsor? Like in addiction coaching. Right. What are your goals for your life, Mr. Floyd? And how are you approaching those goals? Right. You know, how are things going with you and family members in that way? So that we can work in tandem with a psychotherapist who's going deeper in another level. I'm going deep in one level and therapy goes deep in another level. And between those two, we can really, really, really help folks. Right. Yeah. Thank you. And I was thinking more, again, I'm trying to reboot up my own life coaching practice, and the name of my practice, Above All, I think was really God-given because that's what I would like to do with my clients futuristically currently is, again, where do we go from now, right? After possible counseling, psychotherapy, like you said, but oftentimes we get stuck in our own. I've recently have had that moment, just being stuck and not knowing what direction or what path to take, and then also having a life coach or accountability partner to have that accountability, to ask those hard questions about, you know, where do you see yourself
today and tomorrow, and in helping those persons make those appropriate steps in or connections that if they do need psychotherapy, that we have references and resources to direct them alongside of taking one step, forward into whatever life goals they have.
Well, that's why coaching and psychotherapy are a really good team.
Mm-hmm.
Because psychotherapy is digging into the deep issues and uncovering things to be processed, and then kind of once you check what's unconsciously running yourself, then you have to kind of absorb that information and transform it into something that will be helpful, right?
Right.
So
Right.
but then the accountability partner piece is not necessarily something that most therapists are going to be doing.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So having having someone like, okay, you've uncovered procrastination, say the procrastination comes from child abuse and a history of drug abuse, right?
Right.
But then who's going to check in with you sometimes, weekly, with some clients even more, around,
Right.
okay, these are your goals for the week. Did you complete them? How did you feel not completing them? And yay, you did complete them.
Right.
On an elemental basis, that's stepping you through that one step at a time.
Right.
I wish that Mr. Floyd had that kind of support, because it does sound like he was struggling. And that's what really upsets me about this statement from this woman.
Yes.
That she wasn't getting that this man, 5 years not having an issue with the law.
Right.
If we don't know, none of this is proved. I haven't read his autopsy report. We've had one funky ass autopsy report, then others. There'll be a trial. All those things will come out then. Right. But if he had slipped back into using, he deserves compassion and healing.
Absolutely. That's what your love, my mother's love, coming back home when I hit rock bottom. There was no, and I'm an advocate of AA and NA and all of those principles, the 12 steps, but honest to God, it was my mother's couch, being able to come see you, when you gave me that hug and rocked me like I was a little baby. It was the beginning of my healing and my recovery.
I think we can't underestimate the importance of community and family. Right. And sometimes people have that, and sometimes they don't. I mean,
right.
So I don't know. I mean, it feels like Mr. Floyd's family was very loving, but what I picked up from his funeral was that he was taking care of them. There were all these young ones that were talking about how he had been there for them and how he's trying to keep them on the straight and narrow. He was trying to share his life experience up to that point with them. His partner, who's not, I don't believe she was his partner, she was his child's mother, and they were co-parenting, is what I perceive. And folks, feel free in the comment section to correct me if I'm wrong, but she spoke very highly of him as a good and loving father. Right. And so here's this person, this human being, this Black man who had been through much and had made big mistakes, and was trying. And I believe he was working with youth.
Yes.
And for this young woman, it's even more painful because she's a Black woman, to basically trash all that, not get to any empathy whatsoever. Well, the cop didn't have the right to kill him, but blah, 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 blah. Well, he was a criminal. She's contradicting herself through her whole statement. The bottom line is that he was a human being. He was on a path. He was on a struggling life path, and he had made some success. And the thing with the $20 bill, we don't know. It's very easy for someone to pass someone else a bad $20 bill, and then they're trying to buy something with a 20 that they thought was a valid $20 bill. So we don't even know about that. I don't even think that needs to be
And you're also speaking of someone's father. You know, keep that in mind as well. That, you know, his children are hearing these words, whether true or not. You know, again, kings and queens, we just have to do a better job of how we speak about each other. You know, I'm a divorcee. I throughout all the years, I've tried very hard, you know, and we didn't even have children, but I can only imagine if we did have children, that you got to be very careful of how you publicly speak of someone.
You know, I agree with that. And we do want to be, I think there's this magic place that we keep forgetting. It needs to be all binary, good or bad.
Right. Right.
And we don't look at one of the reasons why I have a problem with most funerals is that when someone dies, we do tend to lionize that person.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Tell the truth. You know, right. The good and bad.
The truth is where the grief is, the real grief. Okay. So, you know, my father was an incredibly abusive gentleman. And when he passed, I made sure to go to his funeral because my inner child just needed to see him in a coffin. That was very psychologically important for me to see that this man no longer walked on the planet. He was a very dangerous and unhappy man. He caused a lot of unhappiness to others. And at his funeral, all these people coming up, lionizing him. My father was a very good businessman, and my father had helped a lot of people. And he had helped, he was West Indian, so he helped a lot of people who were coming in to this country from the West Indies and helped them get their start, and all this stuff. And so now it's time for the daughter to say something. And I could feel my brothers going, she's going to say something. And I was like, I'm really touched to hear at all the ways that my father help people. And that was true. I mean, tears streaming. I'm really touched to hear this. And I'm sad that I have nothing to contribute to that conversation. That's what I said. And I wish my father well in heaven. And I wish my father well in the afterlife. And I said I loved him because I do. I did then, I do now. And that's the grief. That's the tears. That's the reality, rather than making up some fake, phony story.
Right.
Tell the truth about tell the truth and shame the devil.
Right.
Right. So here we have this story. Like, she's completely missing the point. And I also do think that some of the people that are making George Floyd an icon of a movement miss this part too. There are people who are seeing him as an icon of a movement. He's on the front page of the New Yorker magazine. It's a very powerful, it's beautiful. And him and other symbols of this fight for racial equity in the country, which is a very important fight. But once you make like a postage stamp out of somebody, it is very easy to forget their humanity.
Right.
You know, right. And I think the point of the story was that here was this man who was struggling, who was having successes, who had a family that loved him, that he was a good father. He was still, it is peers that he was still struggling with drugs. And that he came up upon this horrible racist cop abusing his power, and who may have killed him, because it looks like he may have killed him due to a previous beef between the two of them. That's what it's looking like right now. We'll see. There'll be a trial. It'll all come out. That's the story. It's not about.
And it's, I mean, again, it's not George Floyd. When I hear his name, it does not represent one man. It represents white America putting their knee on our necks for 450 years. That's what George Floyd means to me.
And that's
It's not
exactly what I'm saying, because George Floyd is not, we're not talking about him anymore.
exactly. We're not talking about him anymore. So the Candace conversation needs to be broadened from the individual, regardless of his past.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's another Black man being killed and murdered now on camera.
Yep.
And we've had decades of cops and live PD, which was that was one of my favorite shows. I don't know why, but it was, where we see people on camera, and of course they're not showing that, but
Right.
with social media, how many years have we seen Black people, Black men, mothers and children harmed on camera and then spread on social media?
Yeah.
So for me, the George Floyd movement is enough is enough.
Exactly.
We've been tired. We've been tired for centuries. So
Yeah. Since this is an issue that goes back to enslavement, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And we just hit that point where enough is enough.
Right.
And that is good. And I think, as I wanna wrap up our conversation, I do think that I do know that I want to wrap up our conversation with just honoring George Floyd, the human being.
Yes, absolutely.
And I know that we send our condolences to his family, to his daughter,
Yes.
to all the people who loved him, people who witnessed his struggle, the people who prayed for him and cared about him as a person.
Mm-hmm.
And the only piece I draw from this entire story of Mr. George Floyd, the human being, was that in my belief system, I believe that when he called for his mama, she came for him.
Amen. Amen to that. And also his brother and family members who are now on the front line themselves.
Yes.
You know, the torch has been passed over and we can't stop fighting. You know, we need more than apology. We need policies changed, social and economical, you know, laws and bylaw, you know, policy, really policy. So,
and I completely support that. No city should be spending more money on their cops than they spend on schools.
Right.
So that needs to be checked.
Right.
So we need to take a look at that, and no, public police don't need tanks.
Right.
And grenade launchers. They don't need that.
And we don't need any more prisons. We need schools. We need hospitals. We need mental health care. It's just a lot of work we need.
We need family leave. We need single payer health.
Right.
Minimum income across the board for all people. I mean, we need so much. There's so much work that needs to be done to create an environment where we'd have less people who would make a choice to break the law.
Right.
Or feel that they have no choice but to break the law.
Absolutely.
So let's pray on that for our country.
Yes.
And full support of all the demonstrations. Wear your mask, people. We want you to stay alive, to keep fighting the good fight. And I want to thank you, Miss Stacey, for our conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Such a pleasure. And please let folks know where they can reach you for your services.
Yes, right now I just have a phone number. I'm rebuilding my website. So that would be 301-755-4680. Again, Reverend Stacey Reid, it's been an honor. Contact me anytime.
And folks who are wanting to have my various services, Nia Healing Center offers counseling, coaching, and hypnotherapy. And my Oakland Better Birth Foundation focuses more on birth services, birth and postpartum doula care, referrals to midwives, and parenting education and supporting for folks in birthing and parenting their babies in this beautiful and complicated world. We're going to have all the information for both of our practices down in the description box here in this video. Please comment, share, and like our videos. Please feel free to reach out for our service. services. Have a blessed and wonderful day, and we'll see you the next time.
Thank you. God bless.
God bless, Nancy.